I am back once again. Yeah, I know it's been a long time. I don't know how long it's been. I'll probably edit it in post, but it's been a long time since I've done a review. Um, yeah, sorry I was away. It's been busy for me lately, with a lot of stuff like sports and, such as football and stuff like that. And with busy with school and everything, it kind of has been a little busy lately. So, but anyways, as you see on the turntable, which is brand new, and even though it's manual, here I have not the entire wave, but the main four of the Playmates Godzilla X Kong wave, action figure wave, including Godzilla Evolved, Kong the Shimo with Frostbite, Kong with the Beast Glove, and Skar King with the Whip Slash. So yeah, here they all are in their own respective areas. Now moving on to the packaging, I will just only grab one of them. So the packaging is really basic. It's really just a packaging like this. It's something like this, just a regular Godzilla X Kong promotional art. Let me just move these guys out of the way. It's just the main Godzilla X Kong art, promotional, marketing right there, along with every single thing, including the name, the other side of the figure. On the back, you get what is essentially a bio read-up of every figure, and then you get the other figures in this line. Now, I am missing, unfortunately, the Suko and Doug and Godzilla with the original Godzilla. But yeah, other than that, I have the main core four. Shimo and Godzilla have instructions on how to install the tails. While if I'm looking right here, Kong and Skar King has instructions for his whip. Kong has nothing because he doesn't have an accessory that involves putting something back together. So now that the new Empire has come out, and a lot of other, and the movie is doing really well, why not? And even though it's been a while, it's almost the end of April, I might as well make a review on all of them. So, are they worth buying? Well, let's find out, shall we? Let's find out if they're really worth buying at the aftermarket. So, let's start off with the painting and the sculpting on the rest, but we're going to start off with the first one, and that is Godzilla. So, here is the details and the painting and the sculpt of this figure. Now, the painting and the sculpting on this figure, I mean, for a kid's toy, what could you expect? It's not much, as you could see. It's not bad, but it's not terrible, but it's not that great either. Now, moving on with the head. I mean, look at this. Derp-eyed. Looks really wonky. And also, his jaw doesn't feel, very thick compared to the original Godzilla. It feels very thin. Not that it's, thin, it's fragile. It's just, it looks really small. It feels really small. It just doesn't look right. The painting overall, I mean, yeah, the eye paint is pretty bad, but again, for what you get at the price, it's really not terrible. However, there are some big flaws. As we see here, the neck is a different color compared to the translucent red. All of his dorsal plates, which it's noticeable here, but once we get down to the tail, that's when it becomes much more of a problem. Moving on to the arms. The arms, very detailed looking, but at the same time, they have, one, a weird expression, and two, little arm spikes are not painted. And it's also inaccurate, because if you know in the movie, if you've seen it, spoiler alert, if you know in the movie, his dorsal plates, or his little arm spikes, are actually on his forearm rather than, near his elbow. So, yeah, it's a little bit inaccurate. And it kind of reminds me, I feel like these are more of some of these figures were based off concept art rather than the actual final product, and I think it's more available for Kong. But yeah, I'll show an image here. Yeah, it looks like if I remember correctly, they were on his forearms rather than on his elbows. But yeah, but it's just the nails look really weird. The details, the nails just don't look really good. And then moving on to the body, it just kind of looks a little soft. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great detail shown, but it just doesn't highlight as much detail as I thought it would. And most of all, look at that. It looks very sunken in compared to, some shots in the movie where his gut doesn't look where it looks natural. It reminds me of a Final Wars Godzilla, where everything about this doesn't feel weirdly proportioned. He feels kind of slim, but in a good way. Here, he feels like he's kind of starving for food or something. But yeah, overall, the torso, it's just weird. And then moving on to the legs, they're really long, they're really big, but they're also not a little soft on detail. One thing, and no, this is based off articulation, one thing I was surprised about is he has ankle articulation, which my Godzilla versus Kong Godzilla figures did not have. But yeah, detail's a bit soft, unfortunately. Painting's a bit soft. Well, not painting, the sculpting. And then moving on to the tail, again, this is the main problem. Go from here to here, you get this giant weird color. You get this beautiful bright red, and then it just goes to salmon color. It's nicely sculpted, don't get me wrong. I like the paint, I like the sculpt here, but I just don't like how it just looks really off. It looks so off compared to everything else, which already doesn't look that bad. So yeah, painting and the sculpting, it's not great. It's not terrible. I think it's a bit of an improvement with some of the new parts, with all the new parts here, but at the same time, it's also a bit of a problem if, some of it looks a bit cheap looking. I know these are kids' toys, but I feel like, in comparison to the others, this is unacceptable a little bit. Compared to, Shimo, at least, it's a bit unacceptable. So anyways, for his accessory, he comes with his atomic breath, which for some odd reason again, it feels weird because it's a smaller mouth, so you could have that. And I don't get this. I know Monster Island Buddies mentioned this. There's a side spill effect. Yeah, it's there. It's there. It's not great. It's weird looking, but it's there, all right? It's definitely there. So, yeah, it's pretty not terrible. It illuminates really well with the light. Hell, you could say the same with his dorsal plates. They illuminate very well with the light. But yeah, overall, yeah, that's the details and the accessories and the painting on Godzilla. In terms of articulation, jaw movement, as you see, no neck articulation. I don't want to force it. Arm can go 360, although I don't know if this one could. Oh, wait, it could. And they're also really rubbery. Legs could kick forward, although this one could kind of kick more, but then again, it's just due to the sculpt. Kick back, ankle, and ball jointed tail. Posability is good, but then again, a bit limited for a kid's toy. And then once we move on to Shimo, then I will show you what I mean. But, yeah. Overall, not bad articulation, but could be a little bit better. But who knows, it could be better than the movie Monster series, which I could be wrong, but anyways. Now, let's move on to the other one, which is Kong. I don't know about you, but even though I'm a Godzilla fan, I think this Kong figure rules. This is one of my favorite Kong figures I've owned, besides the Monster Arts exclusive version. And this is probably the best Playmates Kong ever. This is really amazing. First off, the head sculpt. It looks really monstrous looking. I was initially mixed about it, but then, you know, comparing this to the actual original toy, this is a whole lot better. This looks actually a lot more detailed, a lot more intimidating. I love the new that he actually has a beard. I know the Playmates figure has a beard, but I like the fact I like this one a lot more. It looks a lot more like fur. It looks a lot more rugged and stuff like that. And it's so cool. And it makes me wish the original Kong Playmates figure was like this. I wish it had a head similar to this. This arm is relatively the same, other than I want to just gush over how amazing the sculpt is. The sculpt is absolutely amazing. With all the fur and everything like that. And there's even some scratches, which the only paint problem is that there's just some parts that feel unpainted. For example, the beast glove, the straps and everything aren't really painted. And then there are a few scars that aren't painted as well. The painting on the chest is great. It looks really nice. I love the darker fur. I love the beast glove and how like massive it is. Although, again, this spoiler alerts for, again, Godzilla X Kong. If you know in the movie, I don't think it's supposed to be like this. It wasn't supposed to be like a strap, like an infinity gauntlet or something. I love the detail on it, including the labeling here, but I wish there was more paint on the bottom, on the handle, and everything like that, and I wish it kind of carried over here. But yeah, overall, for this Kong toy, I mean, the colors are great, the painting's great, but what I think really carries this figure is the sculpting. The sculpting is just amazing. It's not too, you know, soft looking. It looks like Kong. He has every texture. He has every texture. He's very, very, you know, jagged in a sense, but not in a terrible way. The head sculpt is better, and also this guy is actually really heavy, surprisingly enough. Like, this is a good Kong toy. Look at the detail. Look at the detail on his back. That is amazing. Now, moving on to his accessory, it's pretty light. He comes with only this, what is this? The AVEC. I don't know. This is the Hollow Earth vehicle they used. Minimal, unfortunately, no paint. Wish like the cockpit over here was painted black, but honestly, I really love the sculpting of this thing. It looks really cool. I will say that. So there's that. Yeah. Very cool figure. Now moving on to the articulation. There is a bit of a ball joint, but it's not that much. His head, in reality, can only go 360. His arm can go 360. He has ins out. He has a bicep. He has a bend at the elbow and a bicep swivel, if you can count it. Or forearm swivel. He has a wrist swivel only in his right arm, whereas his left arm with the beast glove, there is no swivel here. Which, I mean, it makes sense, because how are they going to integrate that without ruining the skull? No waist articulation, nothing like that. He has a kick up and back, and that also works as a swivel. Just a few more kinks, including a diaphragm joint and some ankle articulation, could really do this figure justice. Add a few more paint and coloring. This is honestly, and this could be amazing, you know? And 100%, I'm going to definitely try and customize it and make it a lot better. And especially that goes for Godzilla and the rest of the others. But overall, I think, in my humble opinion, Kong is actually my favorite from this line so far. He's really fun to pose. He's awesome. He's really heavy, and the sculpt work is some of the best I've ever seen. So anyways, let's move on to the next character, and that is Skar King. Skar King here. okay, how do I say this in the most positive? Well, there is a lot of positives I could say. First of all, let me move his whip. The painting and the sculpt on this guy is great. Although, again, I feel like the painting is a bit rough. His head sculpt, it looks really nice. I really like it. Although, at the same time, I don't get this red paint over here. It just looks really ugly. It doesn't look as natural compared to his chest. And it also, that's the same argument I could say for his arms. His arms looks really bad. Just like Kong, I really love the sculpt of this guy. He looks really, really well sculpted. Nothing to say there. I love the slimness of this guy. Like, look at that. He's really slim. And I just love this figure overall. I love although not as much as Kong. There are a few things I have a bit of problems with. Again, I do feel the paint on his forearms is a bit wonky. The detail on his head is a bit wonky as well. But overall, despite all those problems, I still had a ton of fun with this figure. I think, he is not bad. Now, moving on. But yeah, I have nothing really to say about Skar King. I just really love the Kong figure so much, I kind of forgot about this guy. Moving on to his weapon, being the whip slash, which, yeah, another spoiler alert, again. This was different in the movie. If you know, in the movie, this thing was really long, but there was also a tip on the end of his whip where he can control Shimo. If you remember in the movie, there was a crystal there, and Shimo was like obeying it because Shimo be Shimo, girl be girl, slave be slave. Anyways, out of pocket comment there. Behind that, it's just, yeah, it's a bit inaccurate. So there's that. And yes, he can hold on to it quite well. And he can whip. Pretty cool, right? It's pretty awesome. And it just simply attaches onto his shoulder, moves up, and then just attaches on the top. But it can be a little finicky, so be warned. Moving on to the articulation, he has a swivel at the head, rotation at the arm, in and out. He has just a single bend on his elbows or bicep, and somewhat of a bicep swivel. Wrist swivels on both of his hands. And of course, the standard legs that you get from Kong. However, he does have something new, and that is his diaphragm joint. Although, at the same time, it kind of doesn't do much, per se. And granted, you could do some weird crap with this. I saw someone put this guy's upper torso on a skull crawler tail on YouTube, so I'll link that below. But anyways, yeah. Overall, I really like the Skar King. Probably my second favorite from this line. My favorite's Kong still. So, anyways, let's move on to the last figure from this wave, and that is Shimo. Anyways, the last figure of this wave I'm going to go over is Shimo. She wasn't really that much of a surprise. She was cool, but she was just more of a pet, which is kind of a shame. But you know what? Hope we get more of her. She's really interesting. But anyways, now all that aside, I really think this figure is good. However, there is one problem I want to talk about, and I just don't like the fact she's kind of small. Once we do size comparisons, I'll talk about it, and then of course I'll mention spoilers about it. But spoilers again, she's small. She's really small. When in the movie, she was like really she was massive, dude. She was huge. But anyways, let's move on to, but all that aside, this figure is really good. the head sculpt is amazing. The only problem is the eyes. I feel like they're a little on the lazier side. They're just a blue dot. But the intricate sculpting on the figure is just amazing. I really love how her whole head looks. She looks absolutely threatening. The details, although I wish were more carried over on her mouth, which, yeah, that's how far open or wide her jaw goes. I wish there was a lot more paint on a lot more pink on her, in the inside of her mouth, but yeah, despite all that, I still really love this head sculpt. And I think the details on her arms are really well done, although I wish, her toenails were painted, which I didn't know they were. I don't remember them being painted, or at least colored differently. Just like Godzilla, though, she does have a problem with her body, where her whole body is just straight up soft, while her arms are straight up detailed, intricate, very kind of reptilian, even though she's obviously a different species of Godzilla. Just everything about this looks really cool. Maybe the only thing is maybe just sink the shoulders a bit more, because the posture looks a little bit weird, but honestly, other than that, it's pretty good. I also really like the translucency of her little dorsal plates, although they're not as awesome as Godzilla. But unlike Godzilla, with her tail, which is also very nicely painted and sculpted, it doesn't really break the flow of the paint and the transition between her torso to her tail. It doesn't look really jarring. It doesn't look off. It looks really good. Now, moving on to her accessory, that being this blue frostbite, which maybe add a bit of white into it. I don't know. Again, just like Godzilla, you do that. Looks really cool. At the same time, the side splash looks really weird. I think with this one, I actually don't mind this one. I'm kind of thinking it's the worst one. I don't know why. It just looks really weird. It looks like it just looks like a toy, like a dog toy or something like that. But anyways, moving on to articulation. Her jaw can open, as you saw, extremely wide. She can look down, she can look up, and there is a swivel on her head. There's no way you can, get her from looking down or then looking to the side or something like that. But all you could do is something like this, which is really silly. Arm articulation, there's a lot of that there, including a swivel at the hands and an in and out motion. However, her back legs cannot only really go that much. There's a swivel, and then there's a ball joint, which is really good. And you can do a pose like this, where she's standing upright and looks kind of weird. So yeah, that's Shimo. She's really cool. She's really nice. So yeah, that's the details and everything about the Godzilla, Kong, Skar King, and Shimo. Now let's move on to some size comparisons. The one I started first, now Shimo standing on her legs almost stands at closely almost 4.5 inches. But if she's standing on her hind legs, like so, she stands almost roughly 7 inches. And then with Godzilla, this is unscripted. With Godzilla, he is going to stand at roughly 6 to 6.5. Kong, whose scale is at roughly, almost 6.5 right there. Maybe I need to fix his legs, but he would stand almost roughly at 6 inches. Moving forward, and then the last one, Skar King. He stands at roughly, if I can get him to stand, unfortunately, because of how slim he is, he can be a little hard to stand. See, he's already wobbling. But he is standing almost roughly at almost 6 inches. Maybe he's past 5, so almost 5.5. Now, let's move on to comparisons with the other guys. Here's the GxK Kong compared to the Playmates GvK Hong Kong Battle Kong. I have the original one, but I just want to go over this is the same thing, just painted with a different head. Again, look at the painting on the chins, look at the painting on the beard, but look at the painting for the fur. There's a lot more definition here. There's a lot more texture here. This just looks more like skin rather than fur. There's some essence of a fur, especially at the back, but it doesn't look like fur compared to Kong from GxK, who has a bunch of fur. And I just love this, and also love the gray chest more than this. This just looks kind of a little weird the more I think about it more. So yeah, overall, not bad. Now moving on to Godzilla. Here is the regular one, and here is the Playmates one. Obviously, there's a size difference. But also, as you could see, this one was the original Playmates Godzilla vs. Kong toy. And if you remember those toys, they would always have this gimmick where you could just peel the skin and then you could reveal something, which putting it back on is a little tricky. But as you see, there's the paint, and this Godzilla has the same sort of problem, but not as bad compared to this. This is a lot more noticeable. But they both have the same problems. They're both a bit soft on paint. I will say proportionally, this looks better than this in terms of the arms. Although it's sad that the neck articulation isn't doing much. The jaw articulation, I don't know, man. It feels weirdly slim. Although I will say, and I'm noticing this, there is a much more, a lot better painted, a lot better in terms of sculpt, sort of, how do I say this, just a better painted inside mouth compared to this. It was just plain old pink. This one is just, there's an actual tongue there. So that's really neat. Compared to this, where it feels like there was just no effort given. Now, again, there is a Godzilla X Kong figure of Godzilla, the original Godzilla. The only difference is, I think the blue here is actually painted. The tail is more pointing up, and the atomic breath is a lot more different. It's not a weird misty beam like this. It's just it's a lot thicker. But yeah, so now let's move on to the final thoughts. Skip or wait for a deal. Overall, these guys are not bad. Again, for kids' toys. Although, I will say they have improved. This Kong and the Skar King figures really showed they are improving the monkeys. The lizards, all the lizardy characters, they're still a bit wonky. Although I will say Shimo has a much better head sculpt and much better arms and legs. And a much better transitioning of the tail and her entire body with the translucent dorsal plates and the painted dorsal plates from her tail to her back. Godzilla, on the other hand, yeah, looks a bit off. I will say, compare it, there are a little bit of inaccuracies, like Shimo is a bit small. Kong's glove isn't really more of a glove. There's a bit of missing paint, and it doesn't really kind of form around his knuckles. It goes around his whole entire hand and his whole entire arm. And Godzilla's, arm spikes on his elbows, they shouldn't be on his elbows. They should more or less be on his forearms. But other than that, I really enjoy these figures. I really think Playmates has improved over the their original Godzilla versus Kong toys. So will I recommend this? Yes, if, as of now, since Haya is gonna take quite a while, this is the best option. But it's not a bad option, it's a temporary option. For kids' toys, these are fun to mess with. Dare I say better than the ones from GxK. If you're collecting them, these are really good also. I love, these figures because they're just, I don't know, man, like, back then, when Jack Specifics had the line, they weren't as detailed, they weren't as big, they were always really small, and they weren't as impressive as, the GvK and especially this GxK line. Really hope that, Playmates still owns the license to the Monsterverse and with Godzilla and all, because I think they have been killing it lately. I remember the days when they were kind of where they're kind of bashed for, but nowadays they're kind of praised. So overall, even though there are some essences of, these figures feel a little cheap, there are some missing paints, and there are some inaccuracies, they're overall not bad. Even though Godzilla is probably my least favorite from this line, unfortunately, he's still really cool. And also, how can I mention, if you want to customize these, you can. These are great bases for customization and great basis for upgrading. Give Shimo and Skar King a whole black wash and stuff like that. Give Kong much more painted scarring on his arm and his leg, and more painting as well on his beast glove. And then, of course, Godzilla with his whole shenanigans over there. So yeah, overall, they're great figures. They're great toys. They're great collectibles, and they serve, a purpose for now until Haya and Monstarts come in. I know Monstarts had their Haya Godzilla Evolved, but that's gonna come until December, and their Haya is waiting until I think December. I think November or either November or November or September at most. So these figures will do for now. So yeah, I give with my own ratings, Godzilla unfortunately I give a 7, Shimo I give a 7.5, Skar King an 8, and Kong 8.5. Overall, they're really good. So yeah, that's the review. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. Hopefully this is a lot easier to edit while I'm doing this. But yeah, until next time, I will see you all later. Bye-bye.